God's chosen ones, why you were born into toxic families. It's a huge gift. Chosen one. Stop everything you're doing right now. What I'm about to reveal will shatter every lie you've believed about your childhood pain. Have you ever wondered why you, of all people, were placed into a family that felt like emotional warfare? Why you had to become the adult when you were still a child? Why every family gathering feels like walking through a minefield of dysfunction and chaos? Here's the shocking truth they never told you. God didn't make a mistake when He chose your family. He didn't accidentally drop you into the wrong household. Your toxic family wasn't your punishment, it was your preparation. You see, while other children were learning to play, you were learning to survive. While they were being protected, you were becoming a protector. While they lived in safety, you were being forged in fire. And tonight, the Holy Spirit is about to reveal why. If you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, if you've ever wondered why you think so differently from everyone else, if you've carried the weight of being the difficult one simply because you refuse to accept dysfunction as normal, comment 999 right now. This message is finding you because your soul is ready to understand what heaven has been whispering to you all along. Before we go deeper into this divine revelation, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and sow that seed of faith. You were never meant to fit into a broken system. You were born to break the cycle. The very family that wounded you was also the family that awakened you. And what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about your purpose. Stay with me, because this isn't just another video. This is your spiritual awakening moment. The pain that nearly destroyed you, it was actually God's greatest gift. Let me show you why. Have you ever looked into the eyes of your family members and felt like you were gazing at strangers? Has your heart ever whispered, "I don't belong here," even as you sat at your own family table? What if I told you that this feeling of being different wasn't a mistake, but the first clue to your divine assignment? You see, there's a sacred truth most spiritual teachers are afraid to share. A truth about why certain souls, powerful, healing souls, are strategically placed in broken family systems. Before you were born, your soul saw this timeline and said, "I'll go there. I'll heal that bloodline. I'll carry that burden." You didn't choose comfort, you chose calling. This is what spiritual wisdom calls a soul contract, a divine agreement your spirit made before entering this world. Not a random assignment, but a purposeful selection. Think of it like this. When a master surgeon is needed for a complicated procedure, they don't send a first-year medical student. They send their most skilled healer. God looked across the expanse of all possible souls and said, that one has the spiritual strength to enter this family lineito, stand in the fire without being consumed by it. Does that sound impossible to believe? Let the word minister to your doubt. In Jeremiah 1-5, God speaks directly to this truth. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Let that sink into your spirit for a moment. Before your first breath, before your name was chosen, before you knew anything of the family you would be born into, God knew. He knew exactly where He was placing you. And He did it with divine purpose. When you felt rejected while everyone else seemed accepted, when your sensitivity was treated as weakness, when your questions were met with silence or anger, these weren't signs that you didn't belong. They were confirmation that you were exactly where you needed to be. Have you ever thought about why certain people can recognize toxicity while others remain blind to it? Why you could see the dysfunction while others seemed comfortable in it. Your awareness wasn't your curse, it was your gift. Your discomfort wasn't punishment, it was awakening. In the story of Esther, we find a young woman placed in a position she never chose in a foreign palace, far from everything familiar. Yet her uncle reminds her of divine timing with these words from Esther 4:14. Perhaps you were born for such a time as this. Chosen one. Those words were written for you too. When your family's words cut deep into your spirit, when their actions made you question your worth, when their neglect left wounds that still ache today, you were being prepared. Not abandoned, not forgotten, not overlooked. You were being forged. Do you remember moments when you felt like you were drowning in family chaos, yet something within you, something unbreakable, refused to be pulled under? That wasn't just your human resilience. That was divine purpose at work. What if your ability to feel deeply, even when it caused you pain, was actually your greatest spiritual gift? What if your sensitivity was actually your superpower? Think about this. A soul with the strength to heal generations doesn't get placed in easy circumstances. Diamond-like spirits aren't formed in gentle environments. They require pressure. Tremendous pressure. Your toxic family wasn't your punishment, it was your sacred training ground. When you look in the mirror tonight, I want you to see beyond the face that carries the scars of your family's dysfunction. I want you to recognize the eyes of a warrior soul who volunteered for one of heaven's most difficult assignments: to enter darkness and carry light, to experience brokenness and demonstrate healing, to inherit toxicity and transmute it into blessing. This understanding changes everything, doesn't it? When you realize that you're not a victim of circumstance but a chosen instrument of divine transformation, how does that shift your story? Your soul made a courageous choice. And every day you survive, every moment you choose love over bitterness, healing over hurt, growth over stagnation. You honor that sacred contract. But this leads us to an even deeper question, and that might shift your understanding even further. What if the very wounds your family inflicted were actually designed to awaken specific gifts within you? What if those painful experiences weren't random acts of cruelty, but precise spiritual catalysts? In our next segment, we'll explore how God uses family pain as divine preparation and why your specific wounds might be the exact keys to your greatest purpose. There's something I need to speak directly into your heart today. Something about the storm you've weathered all these years. Maybe you were criticized until you forgot your voice mattered. Maybe love was given only when you performed. Maybe the silence in your home was louder than any scream. I see you. God sees you. And that pain you've carried, it has a purpose beyond what you can imagine right now. Let me ask you something that might touch a tender place. When was the first time you realized something wasn't right in your family? When did you first feel that knot in your stomach, that awareness that what you were experiencing wasn't what a family should be? For some of you, it was when harsh words became more common than tender ones, when criticism flowed freely but affirmation was rationed like water in a desert. Why can't you be more like your sister? You'll never amount to anything. I expected better from you. Words that cut deeper than any knife, words that carved themselves into your identity until you couldn't separate their voice from your own thoughts. For others, it was the conditional love, the feeling that you were only as valuable as your last achievement, the straight-A report card that earned a moment of praise, the recital where you finally saw pride in their eyes, only to watch it vanish when you failed to meet expectations the following week. You learned early that love wasn't free. It had to be earned, performed for, proven worthy of. And that lesson, it followed you into adulthood, into your relationships, into your faith. Always striving, never quite believing you're enough. And for some of you, perhaps the most painful of all it was the silence. The questions that went unanswered, the achievements that went uncelebrated, the tears that went unnoticed. That silence taught you that your feelings didn't matter. Your pain wasn't important enough to acknowledge. Your presence wasn't significant enough to affirm. And in that silence, shame took root and grew, whispering that there must be something wrong with you, something unlovable, something broken. Beloved, I want you to hear me clearly. That family storm you were born into, you weren't sent to drown in it. You were sent to learn how to navigate its waters. Your wound is not a weakness. It is a gateway, a crack where the light begins to enter. In Psalm 34-18, God makes a promise that might bring tears to your eyes right now. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Did you catch that? The very places where you feel most broken are the exact places where God draws nearest to you. Your pain isn't pushing him away, it's drawing him closer. Consider the wounds of Jesus after his resurrection. When he appeared to Thomas, he didn't hide his scars. He invited Thomas to touch them. Those wounds weren't symbols of defeat. They were evidence of his power over death itself. What if the wounds from your family aren't meant to destroy you, but to distinguish you? What if they're not meant to define you, but to refine you? Isaiah 61:3 promises something remarkable, that God gives a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. Notice the pattern, instead of. God doesn't erase your ashes, he transforms them into something beautiful. He doesn't pretend your mourning never happened, he replaces it with joy. Your despair becomes the very soil from which praise will grow. Think about Joseph for a moment. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. Yet years later, he looked at those same brothers and said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." What if your family's toxicity wasn't just random cruelty? What if it was the precise environment required to develop the strength, compassion, and wisdom that God knew the world would need through you? Take a moment right now. Place your hand over your heart. Feel it beating beneath your palm. That heartbeat is proof that you survived the storm. Not just survived, but carried within you the capacity to break cycles that have persisted for generations. Your scars tell a story of endurance. Your sensitivity reveals profound empathy born from pain. Your struggle for self-worth has prepared you to recognize value in others that the world often overlooks. Here's the truth that changes everything. The very qualities that made you feel like an outsider in your family are the exact qualities that make you God's chosen instrument for healing. But before you can transform your generational line, you must first understand something profound about your pain, something that will shift everything about how you see your family's dysfunction. What if I told you that the deepest wounds inflicted by your family weren't random at all, but were precisely the wounds that would awaken you to your divine purpose? Have you ever looked at old family photographs and noticed the same vacant stare in your grandmother's eyes that you later saw in your mother's? The same tight smile, the same distance? What if your family wasn't just broken? It was ancestrally burdened wounds passed down for generations, now landing on you, because you're the one strong enough to stop it. You see, chosen one, the toxicity you experienced wasn't random. It wasn't just your parents making poor choices or lacking love. What you felt was the weight of generations' unhealed trauma flowing through your bloodline like a silent river, carrying pain from shores you've never even visited. In Exodus 20:5-6, God speaks a truth that many find difficult. "I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." This isn't about punishment, beloved. This is about patterns, energy, wounds that were never addressed, so they found new homes in new hearts, in your heart. Think about it. That critical voice in your head, it might not be yours. It might be your father's voice, who inherited it from his father. That fear of abandonment, it might be your mother's wound, who watched her mother suffer the same. That feeling that you're never quite enough, how many generations of your bloodline felt the exact same way? The Bible tells us in Zechariah 13:9, "I will refine them like silver and test them like gold." Gold doesn't become pure without fire. Silver doesn't shine without being melted down first. What if your pain, the very family dynamics that wounded you so deeply, was actually the fire God chose specifically for you? Pause right now. If this message is speaking directly to your soul type, I break the cycle in the comments below. Let the curse stop with you. Your declaration matters. Your commitment to healing isn't just for you, it's for every generation that came before you and every generation that will come after. When you were a child, did you ever feel like you didn't belong? Like you were mysteriously different from everyone else in your family? That wasn't your imagination, chosen one. That was divine recognition. Your soul knew what your mind couldn't comprehend, yet that you were placed in that family with sacred purpose. Not to continue the cycle of pain, but to end it. Think of Joseph in the Bible, betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, imprisoned unjustly. Yet years later, he tells them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Your story might be different, but the spiritual truth remains the same. The dysfunction in your family wasn't meant to destroy you, it was meant to distinguish you, to set you apart, to awaken something within you that could change the entire trajectory of your bloodline. Look at your hands for a moment. These same hands carry the DNA of generations before you, the same blood, the same genetic code. But here's what makes you different: your awareness, your willingness to look at the pain honestly, your courage to say, "This stops with me." The ancestral burdens of addiction, abuse, neglect, criticism, rage, abandonment, they've been looking for a place to land for generations. They found homes in the hearts and minds of your grandparents, your parents. But when they reached you, something different happened. Instead of simply absorbing the pain and passing it on, you're questioning it, you're feeling it, you're naming it. And in doing so, you're already beginning to transform it. This is why God placed you in that family. Not because He wanted you to suffer, but because He knew you had the spiritual strength to finally break what no one else could break. The very qualities that made you feel like an outsider in your family, your sensitivity, your depth, your ability to see truth, these weren't flaws. They were divine gifts, strategically placed within you for such a time as this. So I ask you, chosen one, what if the greatest act of love you could offer your ancestors isn't to carry their pain, but to finally put it down? What if your healing journey isn't just about saving yourself, but about setting free generations you'll never even meet? The wounds run deep. The pain feels ancient because it is. But remember, so is the promise of redemption. And that promise is about to unfold through you. For decades, maybe you've been asking yourself one painful question: why couldn't they love me right? You carried that question like a stone in your heart through birthdays that went unacknowledged, through achievements that were dismissed, through moments when you needed arms around you, but found only empty air. Chosen one, I want you to hear something today that might shift everything for you. They weren't able to love you, not because you were unlovable, but because they never learned how to love themselves. Their behavior wasn't a reflection of your worth, it was a mirror of their pain. Let that sink in for a moment. You see, what if all this time you've been fighting the wrong battle? What if your family was never your enemy? What if the real struggle was against something deeper, something that held both you and them captive? The Bible reminds us in Ephesians 6:12, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers of this dark world and against the spiritual forces of evil. Your mother's criticism, your father's absence, your siblings' jealousy, they weren't weapons aimed at destroying you. They were symptoms of souls that were themselves broken, trying to navigate their own unhealed wounds. Think about that relative who hurt you the most. Now, imagine them as a child. Imagine what happened to them before you ever entered their world. What pain did they carry? What love did they hunger for but never receive? This doesn't excuse their behavior, but understanding it can set you free. In Matthew 7-5, Jesus says, "First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." What if this isn't just about judgment? What if it's also about healing? About seeing clearly not just others' faults, but the wounds that created them. I once counseled an 82-year-old woman named Margaret who had carried bitterness toward her mother for over 7 decades. Her mother had been cold, critical, never once told Margaret she loved her. But when Margaret found her mother's childhood diary in an old box, she discovered entries from a 10-year-old girl whose own mother had died, whose father had turned to alcohol, who wrote, "Nobody wants me, nobody sees me." Margaret called me in tears. She was just passing down what she knew, she whispered. She didn't know how to give what she never received. That realization didn't erase the pain, but it transformed it from a weapon into a bridge. It allowed Margaret to finally see her mother, not as the enemy, but as another wounded soul. Even Jesus, hanging on the cross experiencing the ultimate betrayal and abandonment, looked at those who put him there and said in Luke 23:34, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. They do not know." How much of your family's toxicity came from places of not knowing how to process their own trauma, not knowing how to break cycles they inherited, not knowing how to give love in ways they never experienced? This doesn't mean you shouldn't have boundaries. This doesn't mean abuse was okay. This doesn't mean you have to welcome harmful people back into your life. But it does mean you can release the question of, why wasn't I enough for them to love me properly, and replace it with the truth. Their inability to love had nothing to do with my worthiness of being loved. I want you to try something with me right now. Place your hand over your heart, feel its beat beneath your palm. Now, breathe deeply. In through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 4, out through your mouth for 6. And as you breathe, I want to ask you something sacred. Can you forgive them? Not because they earned it, not because what they did was right, but because you deserve peace. Because carrying their failures as evidence of your unworthiness is a burden you were never meant to bear. Forgiveness isn't saying what happened was okay. It's saying, I will no longer let what you did determine who I am. It's declaring, I am breaking the chain. Your wounds will not become my identity. You were chosen for your family not to drown in their dysfunction, but to rise above it, to see the mirror of their pain and say, that reflection stops with me. What generational pain are you being called to end? What divine healing are you being prepared to begin? Because the most powerful thing about being one of God's chosen ones isn't just surviving a toxic family, it's transforming its legacy entirely. And that transformation starts the moment you recognize they were never your enemy. They were just another battlefield where the real enemy, unhealed pain, was winning until you arrived. Are you ready to reclaim that battlefield with the light you were born to carry? Listen to me now, beloved. Listen with your spirit, not just your ears. For decades, you've carried this weight, this heaviness of being the one who didn't belong, the one who saw too much, the one who felt too deeply in a family that couldn't understand your heart. You've asked yourself 1,000 times, why me? Why was I placed in this family that wounded me so deeply? I want you to take a deep breath right now, because what I'm about to tell you will change everything about how you see your story. You were never the victim of your family's dysfunction. You were the solution. Let that sink into the deepest parts of your wounded soul. When God looked across generations of pain, addiction, abuse, and broken hearts in your family line, He didn't sigh in defeat. He didn't give up. Instead, He said, I need someone strong enough to enter this darkness. Someone who can see it for what it is. Someone who won't be consumed by it, but will transform it. And then, beloved, He chose you. In Romans 8:18, Paul writes, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Do you understand what this means for you? The pain that has felt so heavy, so defining, it's nothing compared to the glory that is being worked through you. Your suffering wasn't random. It wasn't punishment. It was preparation. You weren't cursed. You were commissioned. You weren't abandoned. You were activated. Chosen one, you are the healing your family has been waiting for. When you felt rejected, it wasn't because you were unworthy. It was because you carried a light that exposed what had been hidden in darkness for generations. When you couldn't understand why you felt everything so deeply while others seemed numb, it wasn't because something was wrong with you. It was because God gave you the sensitivity to feel what needed to be healed. What if I told you that your greatest wound is actually your most powerful gift? What if the very thing that hurt you most is the exact thing God will use to bring healing not just to you, but to generations before and after you? Isaiah 61:4 declares, They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. This is you, beloved, the rebuilder, the restorer, the one chosen to renew what has been devastated for generations. Your family's dysfunction wasn't just something you had to survive, it was something you were sent to transform. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine looking at your family not through eyes of pain, but through eyes of purpose. See yourself not as the victim of their wounds, but as the vessel of healing God has positioned exactly where you needed to be. Do you realize what this means? Every tear you've cried, every night you've lain awake wondering why you weren't loved the way you deserved, every time you felt like the outsider looking in on it was wasted, it was all part of your divine training. You are not defined by what was done to you, you are defined by what you were sent to do. You are not identified by your family's brokenness. You are identified by your heavenly commission. You don't carry your family's shame. You carry the solution to their deepest wounds. The question is no longer, why did this happen to me? The question now becomes, what will I do with what I've been given? Will you remain stuck in the pain of the past, or will you step into the power of your purpose? Will you continue to see yourself as the forgotten one, or will you embrace your identity as the chosen one? Your family couldn't give you what they didn't have. They couldn't love you the way you needed because they themselves were broken vessels. But you are the vessel God is making whole, so that through you, living water can finally flow into the parched ground of your family line. From this moment forward, I want you to hold your head high. I want you to walk with the dignity of someone who carries a divine assignment. Because you do. You weren't cursed. You were commissioned. You weren't abandoned. You were activated. Chosen one, you are the healing your family has been waiting for. Now that you understand who you truly are, let me show you exactly how to step into this calling, how to transform your deepest wounds into your most powerful ministry. Have you ever stood at the edge of a still lake and watched what happens when you drop a single pebble into the water? That first small ripple. It doesn't stay small, does it? It expands. It grows. It reaches places you never thought that tiny stone could touch. Beloved, your healing works the same way. For so long, you may have carried the weight of your family's brokenness like it was yours alone to bear. You've walked with wounds that weren't yours to carry, believing that your pain was isolated, contained, just your private burden. But I need you to understand something profound today. Your healing doesn't stop with you. It rewrites the stories of those before you and those yet to come. When God placed you in that toxic family, He wasn't just thinking about you. He was thinking about generations, past, present, and future. He was planting a seed of redemption in soil that had known only pain for decades, maybe even centuries. Can you feel the weight of that sacred calling? Look back for a moment. Think about your grandparents, your great-grandparents, people whose names you might not even know. They carried wounds too, wounds they never had the opportunity or understanding to heal. Patterns of anger, abandonment, addiction, passed down like unwanted heirlooms. And for generations, no one knew how to break the cycle until you. Isaiah 61 speaks directly to you, chosen one. Listen to these words. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Do you hear that? Devastated for generations. God is speaking about spiritual ruins, emotional devastation that has marked your family line for longer than anyone can remember. And who will rebuild? Who will restore? You, the one who chose healing instead of hatred, the one who faced the pain instead of running from it, the one who said, "The cycle stops with me." I want you to close your eyes for a moment, if you're able. Imagine yourself standing at the head of a long line of people, stretching back into the past and forward into the future. Behind you stand your parents, your grandparents, great-grandparents, each one carrying their unhealed wounds, their unfulfilled hopes. And ahead of you, your children perhaps, your nieces, nephews, the young people whose lives you touch, and beyond them, generations not yet born. Can you see how they're all connected to you? Can you see how your healing creates a fork in the road, a new path where old patterns have no power? This is why your pain matters. This is why your journey through that toxic family wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation, not just for you, but for all of them. When Jesus said in John 8:36, "So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed," He wasn't just talking about individual freedom. He was speaking of liberation that ripples through bloodlines and family trees. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question. What patterns of brokenness will end because you had the courage to heal? Maybe it's rage that's been handed down for generations. Maybe it's addiction or abandonment. Maybe it's shame so deep no one dared name it. Whatever it is, when you heal it in yourself, you're not just changing your life. You're offering freedom to souls you may never meet. You're becoming the fulcrum point where everything shifts. I've worked with thousands of believers over the years, and I've witnessed this miracle firsthand. I've seen how one person's brave journey toward healing becomes a lighthouse for their entire family. Like Martha, who grew up with a mother who could never express love. For 3 generations, the women in her family had been cold, distant, critical. But Martha chose a different path. She did the hard work of healing, of learning to love herself despite never having that model. And you know what happened? Her healing created space for her 78-year-old mother to begin her own journey. 2 years later, they shared the first genuine embrace of their lives. That's the power of your healing. It creates permission where there was none before. You are not healing just for yourself, chosen one. You are healing for those who couldn't, for those who didn't know how, and for those who will never have to carry what you carried because you were brave enough to set it down. This is your legacy. This is your sacred mission. This is why being born into that toxic family was truly a divine gift. Because God trusted you to be the one to say, "It stops here, it ends with me." As we move forward, I want you to hold this truth close to your heart. Every time you choose healing over bitterness, every time you choose forgiveness over resentment, every time you honor your worth instead of accepting mistreatment, You are not just changing your story. You are changing the story of generations. You are not just breaking a cycle. You are creating a new inheritance. So I ask you now, what kind of legacy will you leave? What ripples are you creating with your courage to heal? Have you ever stood in the ruins of your pain and wondered, God, where were you when my family wounded me so deeply? I want you to pause right now and consider something that might change everything. What if, in those moments when you felt most abandoned, the invisible hand of God was actually most active? You see, beloved, what looks like chaos to you looks like precise craftsmanship to the master builder. The very family environment that caused you such heartache was being used to shape your spirit in ways that nothing else could. Think about it. The rejection, it redirected you. The silence, it trained your ears to hear God more clearly. The pain, it humbled your heart so it could carry more power. Remember Joseph in Scripture, betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. Yet in Genesis 50-20, after all the tears and all the years, he looked at those same brothers and said something extraordinary. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Can you see it now? The invisible thread connecting every wound to a greater purpose. In those silent dinners, when no one acknowledged your presence, God was teaching you to find comfort in His voice alone. In those moments when your achievements went uncelebrated, He was preparing you to serve without requiring applause. When your heart broke from familial betrayal, He was expanding its capacity to hold compassion for others who would one day need your understanding. Tell me, chosen one, what if the very things that hurt you most were actually divine appointments? Romans 8:28 promises us, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Not some things, not most things, all things. That criticism that cut you to the core, it was developing discernment in your spirit. That emotional neglect, it was creating space for God to mother and father you Himself. That constant comparison to others, it was teaching you to find your identity in Christ alone. Do you see now how God's invisible hand has been working all along? The family that should have protected you but didn't, they unwittingly prepared you to become a spiritual warrior. The love that was withheld, it created a holy hunger that led you straight to the heart of God. The chaos that surrounded you, it taught you to create peace wherever you go. I want you to take a deep breath right now. Feel the weight of that revelation. Nothing, absolutely nothing in your family history has been wasted. Every tear you've cried has been collected. Every silent scream has been heard. Every moment when you felt invisible, God saw you with perfect clarity. He wasn't absent during your suffering. He was alchemizing it into gold. Think about how a pearl is formed. The oyster doesn't welcome the irritating grain of sand. It hurts. It's intrusive. It doesn't belong there. But the oyster responds by wrapping that irritant in layer after layer of precious nacre until what caused pain becomes something of immense beauty and value. That's what God has been doing with every family wound you've endured. When you were made to feel like you didn't belong, God was setting you apart for a holy calling. When your sensitivity was treated as weakness, God was protecting the very gift that would later help you discern His voice. When your uniqueness made you the family outcast, God was preserving the very qualities He would later use to reach others. The question isn't whether God was working during your painful family experiences. The real question is, will you now recognize His invisible hand and allow Him to complete what He started? Your toxic family wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a divine oversight. It was the precise environment needed to forge your spirit for such a time as this. The master craftsman doesn't create without purpose, and he doesn't waste a single experience, especially the painful ones. So I ask you now, chosen one, What if your greatest source of pain is about to become your greatest source of purpose? As we continue, I'm going to show you exactly how to recognize the divine fingerprints on every aspect of your family story, even the parts that still make you weep. Because it's in seeing God's purpose that your healing truly begins. There comes a moment in your healing journey when everything goes quiet. The battles that once raged within your family seem distant now. The wounds that burned for decades begin to cool. And in this stillness, something profound is happening, though you may not even recognize it yet. Chosen one, have you noticed the silence in your spirit lately? That space where anger used to live, now empty. That constant need to prove yourself to your family, suddenly gone. This isn't emptiness. This is sacred preparation. Some of you haven't just outgrown your family patterns, you've outgrown the energy they operate in. And now, God is resetting you gently, quietly, invisibly, for something sacred. You see, transformation doesn't always announce itself with thunder. The most profound changes often begin in whispers, in moments so ordinary you might miss their significance. Think about a caterpillar in its chrysalis. From the outside, nothing seems to be happening. The cocoon appears still, unchanged. But inside, a complete dissolution is taking place. The caterpillar isn't just growing wings, it's breaking down completely to be rebuilt as something entirely new. This is where you are now. There is a silence that comes before the shift. Not everything holy is loud. Some things are whispered. In Isaiah 43:19, God promises, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." Can you feel it? That gentle current beneath the stillness, that's God, working in the quiet places of your heart, preparing rivers where there was once only barren ground. When was the last time you sat in complete silence, beloved? When did you last give yourself permission to simply be? Without fighting, without striving, without trying to prove your worth to a family that may never fully see you? This season of quiet transformation isn't a punishment. It's not abandonment. It's sacred incubation. Ecclesiastes reminds us, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. There is a time to fight and you've fought bravely. There is a time to grieve and you've grieved deeply. There is a time to rage against the injustice of being born into a family that couldn't nurture your spirit. But now might be your time to be still and know that He is God. Can you trust the silence? Can you surrender to this holy reset? Your family may not understand this new quietness in you. They might try to pull you back into old patterns, the arguments, the guilt, the dysfunction that feels familiar to them. But something has shifted within you, hasn't it? You no longer feel that magnetic pull toward chaos. The old triggers don't ignite the same fires. The words that once cut like knives now barely graze your spirit. This isn't numbness, beloved. This is growth. What if this season of divine quiet is actually God's protection? What if He's drawn you into stillness because what's coming next requires all your strength, all your clarity, all your spiritual maturity? Sometimes God calls us to rise not with a shout, but with a whisper. Not with defiance, but with quiet dignity. Not with noise, but with unshakable peace. Look at your hands, chosen one. The same hands that once trembled with hurt and rage are now steady. The heart that once raced with anxiety around your family now beats with a new rhythm, God's rhythm. This is what happens when God resets a soul. Not a violent uprooting, but a gentle transplanting into richer soil. Some of you are afraid of this quiet. You've become so accustomed to the storm that peace feels foreign, even threatening. You wonder, is something wrong with me? Why don't I feel the pain like I used to? Nothing is wrong with you. Everything is being made right. In this holy reset, God isn't taking anything from you that you truly need. He's removing the weight. You were never meant to carry the responsibility for your family's healing, the burden of trying to change what only God can transform. This quietness, this is your liberation. And in this sacred stillness, if you listen closely, you might hear what God is whispering over your life. Not condemnation for the family you came from, but commendation for the soul you're becoming. Not, why haven't you fixed them? But, well done, faithful one, you've broken the cycle. As we move forward together, I want you to embrace this holy reset. Honor the quiet work God is doing in you now. Trust that this stillness isn't the absence of growth, it's growth at its most profound. And remember, when God calls you to rise quietly, it's often because He's preparing you to speak with an authority that can only come from having first learned to listen. What might God be whispering to your soul in this season of quiet transformation? And what new purpose might be taking shape in the silence? Let me speak to that place inside you. That empty space where childhood memories should be. That hollow ache you carry. I see you. I see the tears you've cried when no one was watching. The nights you've lain awake wondering why your family couldn't love you the way you deserved to be loved. What was taken from you wasn't small. Let's acknowledge that first. You lost what every child should have by divine right, safety in your own home. The freedom to be yourself without fear of criticism. The unconditional love that should have been your birthright. Some of you lost your childhood entirely, forced to become the parent in your own home, carrying burdens no young heart should bear. Others lost your voice, silenced so often that you began to believe your thoughts, your feelings, your very existence didn't matter. And many of you lost your sense of worth, told in 1,000 different ways that you weren't enough, would never be enough. These losses are real, they're profound, and I want you to know that God sees every single one of them. But chosen one, listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The God of restoration has been watching, and in His divine economy, nothing, absolutely nothing, is ever truly lost. Yes, you lost your childhood. Yes, you lost innocence, peace, maybe even your sense of safety. But what you're about to receive is double for your trouble. In Isaiah 61:7, God makes an extraordinary promise. Instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. And so you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours. Let that sink into your spirit for a moment. Double, not just restoration, not just healing, but twice what was stolen from you. Remember Job, a man who lost everything, his children, his wealth, his health, his reputation. The Bible doesn't sugarcoat his suffering. It was devastating, complete. But then we read these words that should ignite hope in every wounded heart. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. Job 42:10. Can I tell you what that means for you? The childhood you lost, God is preparing to give you twice the joy, twice the wonder, twice the delight, even now, even at your age. Yes, even decades later. The safety that was stolen? He's creating within you a security so profound that no human can shake it. A foundation built on something far stronger than family approval. The voice that was silenced. He's giving you a testimony so powerful that it will break chains not just in your life but in generations to come. This is the divine exchange. This is God's economy of restoration. Nothing wasted, nothing truly lost. Everything transformed into something greater. When Joseph stood before his brothers, the very ones who had sold him into slavery, he made this astonishing declaration: "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Genesis 50:20, that toxic family of yours, those wounds that still ache, God is transforming them into your greatest platform for purpose. The sensitivity you developed from being hurt, it's becoming extraordinary compassion. The strength you found to survive, it's being fashioned into unshakable resilience. The wisdom you gained through suffering, it's evolving into discernment that will guide not just you, but others who are lost. You were chosen for that family precisely because God knew what He would create through the exchange. Pain for purpose, wounds for wisdom, tragedy for triumph. Can you see it now? The divine strategy behind your suffering. Your losses weren't random. They weren't punishment. They were the raw materials God is using to craft a testimony that will echo into eternity. If you've ever felt like your losses were too big to recover, type "Restore me, Lord" below. Let heaven record your declaration. Let the angels take notice that today you're stepping into the divine exchange. How long have you been waiting for someone to make things right? How many years have you carried the weight of what was stolen from you? Beloved, the waiting ends today. The restoration begins now. What if the very things that broke you are about to become the channels through which God's greatest blessings flow into your life? What if every tear you've cried is being collected by a Father who intends to transform each one into a jewel of testimony? The question isn't whether God can restore what was lost. The question is, are you ready to receive what He's been preparing all along? Double for your trouble, beauty for your ashes, joy for your mourning. The divine exchange is waiting, and it begins with a simple act of faith, believing that in God's hands, even the worst chapters of your story can be transformed into something beautiful. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. What I'm about to tell you may be the most important truth you'll ever hear about your story. For years, maybe decades, you've carried the weight of feeling broken, damaged, like something in you was fundamentally flawed. That family of yours, they made you believe it, didn't they? The criticism that cut so deep, the comparison to others that left you feeling inadequate, the moments when you tried to speak your truth only to be dismissed or ridiculed. I see that pain in you, that questioning of your own worth, that voice inside asking, "What's wrong with me that I couldn't be loved properly in my own family?" But what if I told you that everything you've believed about yourself was built on a lie? Chosen one, you weren't broken. You were hidden until the right time. And now, the veil is lifting. Have you ever watched a master craftsman at work? Before revealing their masterpiece, they keep it covered, protected from dust and premature eyes. Not because it's flawed, but because it's too precious to reveal before its appointed time. That's you. God placed His most precious creations, those destined for extraordinary purpose, in the most unlikely places, like Moses in the bulrushes, like David in the shepherd's field, like you, in that family. Do you understand what I'm saying? The very dysfunction that hurt you was actually protecting you, shielding you from a premature revealing, preparing you for this moment right now when you would finally see the truth about who you really are. Ask yourself, why did their words cut so deep? Why did their rejection feel so personal? Because somewhere deep inside, your soul knew they weren't seeing the real you. They weren't rejecting you, they were rejecting the glimpse of divinity they saw in you that they couldn't understand. In Matthew 5:14-16, Jesus declares, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house." Your light threatened the darkness they had grown comfortable in. Your authenticity challenged their masks. Your gifts reminded them of what they had sacrificed or surrendered in themselves. So they tried to dim you, to convince you that your brightness was actually brokenness. But chosen one, they were wrong. Everything they said you'd never become, you're becoming. Everything they couldn't see in you, God already planted within you. Every gift they tried to diminish is about to shine brighter than you ever imagined possible. Romans 8:19 tells us, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God." As we come to the close of our time together, I want you to take a deep breath. Feel the weight of revelation settling into your spirit. The family that felt like a burden, God designed it as a blessing. The pain that seemed like punishment, it was always preparation. For some of you watching, you've carried these wounds for 40, 50, maybe even 70 years. You've wondered why God placed you in that family, why the criticism cut so deep, why the rejection lasted so long, why understanding seemed to always be just out of reach. Today, I hope you see it clearly. You were never forgotten. You were specifically chosen. Remember the story of Joseph, rejected by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. For years, his life looked like a tragedy. But in Genesis 50-20, he makes this profound statement to the very brothers who betrayed him. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Your story carries that same divine fingerprint. So now that you know, this pain was never punishment, but a platform. What will you do with it? Will you continue to see yourself as damaged goods? Or will you finally step into your divine assignment as a cycle breaker and a healer? The choice you make in this moment doesn't just affect you. It touches your children, your grandchildren, and generations you'll never meet. Your healing becomes their inheritance. Your courage becomes their foundation. I want you to do something right now. Place your hand over your heart and repeat these words. "I am no longer a prisoner of pain. I am a carrier of purpose." Feel those words. Let them sink deep into places where shame and rejection once lived. Type that declaration in the comments below. I am no longer a prisoner of pain. I am a carrier of purpose. You are not alone on this journey. There are thousands of chosen ones watching this very video, each with their own story of family pain, each being called into their divine purpose. Subscribe and join this chosen transmission family. We are rising together. Each week, we'll explore another aspect of your spiritual awakening. If this message stirred something deep within you today, consider leaving a super thanks. Your generosity doesn't just support this ministry, helps us reach more souls who are still trapped in cycles of family pain, wondering if God has forgotten them. And before you close this video, share it with someone. You know who they are, that friend, that family member who's still wrestling with their story. One click from you could be the divine appointment that breaks their cycle too. Let me pray with you. Heavenly Father, I place my hands on the shoulders of every precious soul watching right now. Some have carried family wounds for decades. Some have almost given up hope. Today, I ask you to seal this revelation in their hearts that they were chosen, not forsaken, selected, not rejected. Let your healing power flow into every broken place, every painful memory, every unspoken hurt. Lord, give them courage to walk in their new identity as cycle breakers and healers. When old doubts creep in, remind them of your purpose. When family patterns try to pull them back, strengthen their resolve and surround them with community that sees their value and calls forth their gifts. Thank you that their story isn't over, it's just beginning its most powerful chapter. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for staying with me through this message. I believe with all my heart that God directed you here today. This wasn't random, it was divine appointment. I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did God use your family experiences to shape you? What cycles are you breaking? Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Remember, you weren't born into that family by accident. You were born. -16. Jesus declares, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house." Your light threatened the darkness they had grown comfortable in. Your authenticity challenged their masks. Your gifts reminded them of what they had sacrificed or surrendered in themselves. So they tried to dim you, to convince you that your brightness was actually brokenness. But chosen one, they were wrong. Everything they said you'd never become, you're becoming. Everything they couldn't see in you, God already planted within you. Every gift they tried to diminish is about to shine brighter than you ever imagined possible. Romans 8:19 tells us, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God." As we come to the close of our time together, I want you to take a deep breath. Feel the weight of revelation settling into your spirit. The family that felt like a burden, God designed it as a blessing. The pain that seemed like punishment, it was always preparation. For some of you watching, you've carried these wounds for 40, 50, maybe even 70 years. You've wondered why God placed you in that family, why the criticism cut so deep, why the rejection lasted so long, why understanding seemed to always be just out of reach. Today, I hope you see it clearly. You were never forgotten. You were specifically chosen. Remember the story of Joseph, rejected by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. For years, his life looked like a tragedy. But in Genesis 50-20, he makes this profound statement to the very brothers who betrayed him. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Your story carries that same divine fingerprint. So now that you know, this pain was never punishment, but a platform. What will you do with it? Will you continue to see yourself as damaged goods? Or will you finally step into your divine assignment as a cycle breaker and a healer? The choice you make in this moment doesn't just affect you. It touches your children, your grandchildren, and generations you'll never meet. Your healing becomes their inheritance. Your courage becomes their foundation. I want you to do something right now. Place your hand over your heart and repeat these words. I am no longer a prisoner of pain. I am a carrier of purpose. Feel those words. Let them sink